Welcome to Scroll Ideas, Scroll's long form podcast. Every episode, we'll take an idea that Indians are discussing and debating and break it down over the course of an hour. And we'll do this with a particularly brainy guest. For this episode, we have with us Mr. Ziya Us Salam, who's written a rather interesting book called Being Muslim in Hindu India. And it basically traverses what is pretty much the burning topic in India right now, the position of its minorities and specifically its significant Muslim minority. Welcome to Scroll Ideas here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Very pleased to have you. Um, Tell us what got you writing about this book. It could be a long answer, but what prompted you to enter into what is such a thorny and difficult topic?
Couple of things. A, I'm a Muslim, and Muslims in India are today a besieged community. And nobody across the political or social spectrum is ready to raise his or her voice for Muslims today. You see different political parties, and I'm not talking only of the ruling party, but even in the opposition. How many times do parties like NCP or DMK or BRS in the leading opposition Congress, they use the word Muslim from a public platform? Nobody does these days. The opposition confines itself to the euphemistic expression of minorities. And the BJP, obviously, they seem to have an anathema to the word Muslim and everything related to Muslims. So, at a time when the community is besieged and attempts are being made to make it voiceless, to invisibilize the community, I thought it is important to raise one's voice. As they say, for a little infant, even the mother doesn't suckle the baby until the baby cries. So, it is that attempt to draw attention to the plight of the community in contemporary India. At a second level, it's also an attempt to fulfill a debt one owes to posterity. The next generation should not feel that whatever was happening in India, Indian Muslims were too scared or too occupied with issues of survival to document their plight. In the years to come, people ought to know what we had gone through is something similar to what we underwent in 1947 as a nation.
So that's an interesting point. You're basically writing from the vantage point of being a Muslim. So describe to us right now, and especially over the past decade, what has it been like to be a Muslim in India?
To be a Muslim in India, contemporary India post 2014, is to be scrutinized for every action of yours. Whether it is as simple as what you dress up in, or where you study, where you pray, what you eat, everything is sought to be decided by the certain elements of the majority community. I won't say majority community, but certain right wing elements of the majority community.
Mm-hmm.
We have been born and brought up in India. My parents have been from here since 800, 900 years, all my ancestors. But never once has anybody raised a question about a Muslim man's beard or about a Muslim girl's hijab. Nor have there been questions about madrasas, so to say. Yes, there have been questions about reforms needed for madrasas, but not that they are obstructing development of the country and so on, or that they are preaching secessionism. But since 2014, every action of the Muslim community is scrutinized. It seems like the community is under the microscope 24/7. Not just that, we are also supposed to be answerable and accountable for what may or may not have happened in medieval India. The media is very keen to do a time switch from, say, 12th, 13th, or 16th century straight to 2023, 2024, leaving aside the laudable role which Muslims played in India's freedom struggle. When was the last time you saw India's media highlighting the contribution of, say, Maulana Azad, Hakim Ajmal Khan, and other Muslim freedom fighters who were there? Today, the message which our media, obviously under certain instructions from the corridors of power, which the media is giving today is Muslims are the others in India today. They are not part of the mainstream, and they are the ones who are causing a lot of trouble in the development of this country, in the unity of this country. Whether you take it in the form of uniform civil code or even otherwise, it's always the Muslim community which is held up as a villain. This book is an attempt to right many of those wrongs and to draw attention to the fact that it's not easy being a Muslim in India today. I'll give you one example, which I have said on certain other fora in the past. When lynching began, lynching of Indian Muslims, with the case of Akhlaq in Dadri on September 28, 2015, the entire media across the country, irrespective of the language of their communication, covered it as a major tragedy, as a major crime. It was there on page one of every newspaper, and it was discussed in prime time news also. But within a couple of instances, the media lost all interest on lynching of Muslims. It became the new normal. Now, when there is a news about a Muslim man being lynched in Haryana or a Muslim man being lynched in UP or wherever, it is confined to a couple of lines on the inside pages of some newspapers. Most don't even bother to give it a space and is left to portals like Scroll to talk of those atrocities. Worse, all these years, it's almost 10 years now, 9 years plus, when these lynching instances have taken place, on not a single occasion has the Prime Minister of India or the Home Minister of India condemned the lynching of Muslims through a public statement or through a message on Twitter or anything like that. In no case has there been a rehabilitation package announced. In no case has the victim's family been helped to get back to life in any way. Instead, we have had many cases where the police has filed complaints against family members of the deceased, in some cases even against the victim himself. How many times in independent India have you seen the police lodging complaint against the person who has been killed? But we saw this in the case of Dadri, we saw with Muhammad Akhlaq, and we saw that with Pehlukan in Alwar. Yes, the wrong was corrected in a brief while, but it said a lot about the mindset. For instance, I'll take you back to Akhlaq's case. When the police first got to know of his murder in Dadri, what was the first thing the police did? Police did not try to get the footprints of the people who had attacked a man sleeping in his bedroom and dragged him to the town square and beat him to pulp over there. Instead, the police went to his house and raided the refrigerator to find out what was he eating. Is there any parallel in history where the police has raided the fridge of any victim rather than trying to find clues through fingerprints of whosoever has used the doorknob or the railing or any such thing, or the footprints? There was no attempt to find the killers of Akhlaq. The attempt was to find out, was he actually eating beef? Was he eating mutton? Was he eating chicken? His food habits were scrutinized after his murder. The attempt was not to lay the hands on the murderers. And when the people responsible for his lynching were arrested by the police, one of the accused was Ravin Sisodia. And after a few days of arrest, he died in police detention. Police said that it was due to dengue, which his family members contested. And when his body was given to them, they refused to carry out a cremation. And what did our Union Minister Mahesh Sharma do? He did not ask them to go ahead with the cremation, nor did the police tell them to go ahead and carry out the rituals. Instead, Mahesh Sharma went to their house, the house of Ravin Sisodia, met the villagers over there, and respectfully wrapped the body of the murder accused Ravin Sisodia in a beloved tricolor. What was the message he was trying to send Indian audiences, all the Indians? That if you kill a Muslim, you deserve the highest honor and your body will be wrapped in our beloved tricolor. It's an honor reserved for those who die fighting for the soil of the country against Pakistan or China.
So you raise a number of really very important issues, Ziya, that I think we'll unpack through the course of this interview. I'm going to pick up where you started. You said that you sort of indicted the role of the police, you indicted the role of politicians, ruling party politicians in the Dadri case. I want you to help us to understand how much of what has happened over the past decade has been top down and how much of that has been bottom up. So, has this always existed in India, this sort of tendency towards majoritarianism? And this is just a sort of opening of the portal? Or has something new happened after 2014?
The new thing which has happened after 2014 is this kind of hatred towards Muslims has become not just acceptable, but you can say popular and worthy of emulation. Yes, there was a fringe element in our society, right since 47 and even before that, which nursed those tendencies. And it was not limited to Hindus alone, it was about Muslims as well. But those people were the fringe. Now the fringe is the center stage. Like in a classroom of 40 students in a school, there would invariably be 3 4 kids who were like bullies or who would nurse those kind of sentiments if they were boys or girls from the Muslim community in a predominantly Hindu school and vice versa. But those boys and girls were heavily outnumbered by others. Now is the sensible Indians who are in danger of being outnumbered by these bullies. That is the difference. I'll tell you from my own experience. Boys and girls with whom I used to study in a school from nursery KG onwards, and we were friends all these years, even in social media. And since 2014-15, gradually most of them have drifted away from me. Many of them have blocked me on social media. It hurts like anything when you see that you used to play with this boy in school times. You used to hang out together, you used to play cricket together, go by public transport buses together, share all the good things and bad things together. Suddenly, one not so fine day, he writes a hate mail to you, holding you responsible for what Ghazni may or may not have done, what Gori may have done, what Babar may have done, and so on and so forth. At times, it leaves me thinking, did he always have those kind of grudges towards Muslims? Or is something which has been tapped by the government today? Either way, the loss is that of our society where bonds of fraternity have been ripped apart for last 10 years. And that's a very sad condition to be in, whether you are from the majority community or the minority community, because at the end of the day, a society has to be cohesive for a nation to progress. A society where people are fighting each other cannot be expected to progress. And there's a sad reality, we see it everywhere. There are periodic calls for the economic boycott of Muslims. And it's not just, as you said, bottoms up, that the common leader in a particular village may have made that stray call, or some panchayat may have made that stray call to boycott Muslims. Is the ruling party MPs who have gone to town and have hinted as much, in some cases said as much, in other cases even asked the masses to take to the ways of the bullet. What was that slogan if it was not an incitement to violence? Goli maro. That kind of thing. So it obviously comes top downwards. It's not the other way around in most of the cases. And more is the loss for the country.
So you're basically saying 2014 was the real inflection point when the BJP basically came to power, is when this trend of your book that you described starts. One thing that I'd like you to explain is, I think, which you've written about in your book and has been actually commented upon quite widely, is Muslims are getting politically marginalized, right?
Absolutely.
They have very little voice in the corridors of power.
Muslims have been betrayed. We are not just marginalized.
Right.
Muslims have been betrayed by the political spectrum. As I've written in this book, Being Muslim in Hindu India, there was a time when after every Lok Sabha election, there would be huddles of Muslim gentlemen and a few women who will stand with a pen and paper and listen to the radio giving the latest trends in the days when we didn't have so many channels and all that, and certainly internet was not there. And they'd be glued into the results of elections of who was winning, who was losing, and counting the number of Muslim candidates who were likely to make it to the Lok Sabha on different parties' tickets, be it the Congress or any other Samajwadi or BSP, whatever the case may be. And they would take great pride in that. And that was also such a splendid advertisement for India's democracy that India's largest minority wanted to participate in it at the grassroots level, wanted to have a stake in it, and make a difference to the country's fortunes in the years to come. Today, unfortunately, what we have seen since 2014, it obviously began with the BJP. More and more political parties are shying away from giving tickets to Muslims. If they have not stopped it altogether, they have curtailed it heavily. And today, since 47, is the first time ever that we have a central government which does not have a single Muslim MP, which does not have a single Muslim minister.
So, Ziya, could you explain to us why you think having Muslim MPs or ministers is so important? If it's just about development, could a non-Muslim MP or a minister also
If it
not
was
do that?
not, why did the Prime Minister give the slogan of Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas?
Right.
Where is Sabka Saath? Was that just a hollow slogan? If it was, then it's an ultimate case of hypocrisy. Why would not every community have a stake in India's development? Why would you conclude that if you have a Muslim MP, he would not work for the development of his constituency or that of the country, and only a person from the majority community will? That kind of thinking presupposes the disposition that you're questioning the patriotism of Muslims in the country. And that is something which is beyond discussion at any point of time. If you question patriotism of any person on the basis of his or her religion, that is one thing. But what I was saying was, it did not limit itself to the BJP. The
Right.
Congress has cut down on the number of tickets for Muslims, and their regional parties like AIADMK, DMK, supposedly in the more cultured, more educated South, who have not given a single ticket to Muslims in the last elections. Same with BRS, which is earlier TRS. They did not give a single ticket to a Muslim. And Congress, which is either the ruling party or the leading opposition party in Rajasthan, how many Muslim MPs has he sent to parliament from there since 1947? Only one person has been elected twice on a Congress ticket, one Muslim was made as a representative of Rajasthan. The story is the same in Madhya Pradesh.
What's the explanation for this? Why is it such a wide trend that all political parties are marginalizing Muslims?
It's disrespectful towards the majority community.
Right.
The political parties are peddling soft Hindutva, except the BJP, which is obviously hard Hindutva. And some of the other, they seem to be under this misconception that our Hindu brothers and sisters will not vote for a particular candidate if the political parties put up a Muslim or a non-Hindu in their fray. Yes, it is not beneficial for the Muslim community, but it's an indictment of the majority community in its own way, that they have become so straight-jacketed, so narrow-minded in their approach that they refuse to put up to vote for a Muslim candidate, even if he or she is capable of delivering after winning. And we saw that in Western UP's elections, where Jars did not vote for RJD's, RLD's candidates or Samajwadi's candidates because they were Muslims.
Right.
The Jat vote was not transferred because the candidate was Muslim, not the other.
But the other way around happened.
The other way around it happened.
Voters voted for Jat candidates.
In the run-up to Vidhan Sabha elections of UP in 2022, there was farmers' struggle, farmers' protests against free agrarian laws, and most of them were, besides Punjab, from Western UP. And they all swear that they will vote against the government, that is the BJP government. But when finally the Vidhan Sabha elections came, they all had a rethink. And I spoke to many of them, and you would have seen them too. Many of the voters said, yes, when we went inside, we could not bring ourselves to vote for a Muslim candidate.
Right.
So that is the saddest state of affairs, and this malice has gone deep down in our society. And I don't think even if we have a change of government at the center in 2024, which looks unlikely as it is, but if even if it takes place, the malice will take a long time to clear up. And that's very sad.
You know, you'd mentioned a very interesting thing back at the start of the interview. You'd mentioned that this is the worst time for Indian Muslims in 1947.
Yeah.
So I want you to help us chart, because I think a lot of the post-partition immediate Muslim experience is not really captured. I think I can maybe think of Garam Hawa, which captures it. I want us to explain what is changing. So I think the idea of Muslim marginalization has existed all through independent India's history. What has changed, and what was, so if you were a Muslim in 1949 in UP versus today, can you chart what is changing?
See, my father was in Lahore at the time of partition.
Mm-hmm.
He hailed from Rampur, yes, but he rejected the theocracy of Pakistan, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and came to a pluralist society and democracy of India. And I'm not saying that he was the only one, there must have been so many others. So he chucked his job and said in Urdu, Mujhe apna watan pyara hai. So he did not regard the newly founded state of Pakistan to be his watan.
Right.
His watan was India. And that is where he was. And yes, obviously, the early years after independence were not easy. And full credit to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru for keeping all Indians together at that time. There was no discrimination on the basis of your religion. Yes, there were obviously relief measures announced for refugees from Pakistan, as they ought to have been. But when Muslim houses were plundered, we know what Mahatma Gandhi did when they were plundered in Delhi and other places, when Muslims' lives were in danger. Even Sardar Patel spoke up. So gradually things became better, and even our Hindi cinema acted like a balm at that time. You would so if you go back in time, you'll understand that there were films which talked of the cohesive nature of India's past, our pluralist past, our shared living. That is why we had films like Anarkali, Mughal-e-Azam, Jahan Ara, Taj Mahal.
Do you think Bollywood has changed now?
Today, Bollywood is the handmaiden of politics. Right. It is responsible, largely responsible in the mind of the common man for projection of Muslims as the villains of the country. They toy with history, they concoct history, they peddle myths in the name of history, all with the idea of projecting Muslims as the villain.
Which movies has this happened?
Plenty. You see Tanhaji, you see Padmavat, and so many of them all alone. What have they done? When they talk of Alauddin Khilji in Padmavat, they don't talk of his administrative reforms. They don't talk of his economic reforms. They don't project him as a man who united India from, say, modern Haryana and Punjab up to Deccan. They don't project him as a liberal ruler who did not even know his Friday prayers, who did not follow Sharia, but he said he has his own norms of justice and he will go by his heart. Because it doesn't work to show a Muslim who is a liberal who still gives justice. So he was projected as a bloodthirsty tyrant. And the idea is always to appeal to the baser instincts of the audience and tell them, look, these Muslims were raping your women in the past. These Muslims were killing your women in the past. They were plundering all your goodies. They're going away. This is not just fabrication of history. It's actually very venomous. It wants to create fissures in society. In many ways, it has succeeded. You would have seen the kind of response that Padmavat got. And more recently, Kashmir Files got. It was not just about the pain of the Kashmiri migrants who had to leave Kashmir under extremely unfortunate circumstances. It was the idea was to hold up Muslims as the villain again, because Muslims too had to leave Kashmir. Not as many as the Hindus, but about 20%, 15% of the migrants from Kashmir at that time were Muslims. As historians have also said, how many times has Hindi cinema talked of the plight of a Muslim in contemporary India? You talked of Garam Hawa. Garam Hawa was made almost 50 years ago. Today, nobody will dare to make Garam Hawa. Right. And that is why we need this book.
I found this Khalji point very interesting. This is something that I come across again and again. We constantly discussing history. Like right now, I think
we don't discuss history anymore. We discuss mythology.
We discuss. So I mean, right? Just I think we're recording this, and just a few days back, the Gyamvapi ASS survey came out. we're constantly, discussing what Muslim kings did or did not do. We're discussing partition. We're discussing Jinnah. What is driving this incredible sort of politicization of
It's
history?
very simple. It's all egged on by the ruling dispensation. The idea of the ruling party is to fulfill the dream of MS Golwalkar, who said it very openly, very clearly, and on more than one occasion that India belongs to those whose Pitrubhu and Punyabhu lies within the geographical confines of the country. That means whose sacred land as well as the fatherland is here. And those whose Pitrubhu or Matrubhu is India but whose Punyabhu, that is a sacred land, lies outside the geographical confines of India, they can live here at the sweet will of the majority community, asking for no rights, asking for no special treatment, asking for no equality. And that is exactly what has been happening for last 10 years. We have this cases where Muslims have not just been lynched, we have cases where Muslim girls were scoffed at for their hijab and tried to be kept away from education despite all the wonderful slogans of the government about Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. But when a Muslim girl goes out to study, you make it difficult for her. When a Muslim boy who is a first generation learner, whose parents cannot afford to send him to a school, he goes to a madrasa and gets some basic elementary education. You make it difficult for him by closing down the madrasa. For the first time ever, we have the chief minister of a state, in this case Assam, on record saying he wants to abolish the word, eradicate the word madrasa. He doesn't even understand the meaning of the word madrasa. Madrasa is a place where one sits down for a lesson. How different is that from school? He is just passing off his ignorance to divide the society further. Again, the idea is to fulfill Golwalkar's dream that Muslims don't deserve to get educated. Muslims don't deserve to have their own institutions. Muslim girls don't deserve to go to school or college. And obviously, they don't deserve to eat what they want to eat. During Navratra, why is entire UP and Haryana, Delhi, and parts of Madhya Pradesh also, why are shops closed twice a year for 9 days each, 18 days in a year? In 2023, Pandits declared that the month of Shravan will last for 59 days, which is effectively 2 months. And for 2 months, no meat shops were allowed to be opened. The chief minister said because it is following on the routes of Kamariyas. But there were cases, as has been reported by the press, where shops were many kilometers away from the routes of Kamariyas, yet they were not allowed to be open. Because the misconception is the Muslims who eat beef, is the Muslims who eat mutton, who eat fish, even egg shops are not allowed. So Muslim who cannot have non-veg food, Muslim boy cannot go to madrasa, Muslim girl cannot go to a school wearing a hijab, Muslim cannot open his meat shop in the area. What can he do? And then if he goes to masjid, there are attacks on his masjid in the middle of prayers. We saw that in Haryana. It is widely reported, including by Scroll. People are offering their Isha prayers and mob comes and ransacks the masjid. What does the police do? Instead of arresting the accused, they arrive at a truce and the truce says, no outsider will come and pray. When did a masjid have that geographical boundary? Masjid is for all. When the azan is said from the masjid, it invites everybody. Hayya al salah, hayya al falah. It translates to come for prayer, come for success. It does not distinguish between one villager and another. In Northeast Delhi, 19 places of Muslim worship were attacked during 2020 violence. How many of them were rehabilitated by any political party or by the ruling party in Delhi or at the center? It's like Muslim property is attacked, Muslim places of worship are attacked, and then the community is expected to play the role of a good Samaritan and pick up the broken pieces, bring their life back on order. Not sure when will be the next attack.
You mentioned education, Zia. Could you tell us how Muslims are sort of navigating the more banal issues of bread and butter, like how are Muslims approaching education? How are Muslims approaching employment? Are there barriers for them to cross there also?
We've already talked of education, with girls being prevented from going to school on the flimsy reason of hijab, and madrasas being attacked. And we know Yogi Adityanath government ordered madrasas in Muzaffarnagar to be closed within 24 hours. And we also know the well documented case of a Muslim boy who was asked by the class teacher that all the Hindu boys should stand up and slap him. At every step, the attempt is to make the Muslims other in their own country. A Muslim girl topped in her school in Gujarat, but she was not given her topper certificate in the school function because it was absolutely beyond their imagination that a Muslim girl would top the school. She did. Then she was given her certificate only in school, in her class, whereas the girl who came second, who was not a Muslim, she was given the prize in the assembly. When a Muslim does good work, it embarrasses many people. When a Muslim boy, little boy, seeks education, even if he's a first generation learner, there are teachers like Tripti Tyagi to make sure that the father of such a child doesn't send his next child to school. There are these obstacles, but having said that, the community is looking within. There are constant attempts that more and more Muslim boys should get the benefit of coaching, even if it is private, and crack mainstream examinations, whether it is for a central government job or state government job, and even for something like UPSC exams and IITs, etc. We know about IIT 30 with Remani, and also Zakat Foundation's work with UPSC IAS aspirants. That is a silver line. But again, that effort has come from the community itself.
Right.
Without any help from the larger society, without any help from the government. And I would like to recall what one of the electronic media channels did when more Muslim boys made it to UPSC on the basis of their own hard work and through a completely transparent, honest examination. They started a program called UPSC Jihad. And when Jamia's students made it to UPSC, they called the program Jamia Ke Jihadi. For these people, a Muslim cannot do any good, nor can they tolerate a successful Muslim. When Muhammad Shami in the World Cup, he thanked God after taking a wicket. They lampooned him for trying to prostrate on the cricket field, and they are perfectly fine with Navratra at an airport, Navratra dance or any such thing. These are the people who want to invisibilize Muslims, who want to make sure that a Muslim loses his religious, social, cultural, economic identity and lives only at the sweet will of the majority community, just as Gulwalkar had advised some 80 years ago.
There you, I think over the course of the interview, raised the issue of the media a number of times.
Yes,
How
absolutely.
much has the media got to do with this?
Plenty. You're from the media, I'm from the media. We understand the kind of headlines which are drafted every evening on electronic media. When was the last time our media sought to apply balm on our society? You have those visuals of Jamia Ke Jihadi, and then you even have the audacity to put up pictures of Haram Sharif. You have audacity to put up pictures of Ajmer Sharif. What kind of society are we living in? We have a program like Mandir Ram Hamare Mandir Hamara, Band Masjid Wale Kahan se badhare, with those kind of headlines. Does anybody need to watch media anymore? If you're watching media, you are enabling fascism. You are enabling the othering of your own countrymen. If you're watching electronic media today, where is the voice of sanity in any of the English or Hindi channels which we tend to consume every evening?
Is this a mainly Hindi English problem, or you think it's across languages?
I won't be in a position to talk of regional languages. I don't follow many of them, but I do hope and fervently so that they are better than the Hindi ones.
Right.
And I'm more than certain that they will be, because you cannot be worse than what many of our Hindi channels are. I referred to one of them just now. It talked of Jamia Jihadi, and which was criticized by the Supreme Court as well for its projection. And there have been cases where press council has also had to step in. But usually the punishment is just a rap on the knuckles.
Usually in a liberal democracies are like a democracy has always a tendency to give in to majoritarianism. But usually in a liberal democracy, there are always checks and safeguards, especially in the law, which are supposed to protect minorities, which by definition are smaller in number. How badly has India done on that front? Has the law come to the
See,
security and rescue of Muslims? Have the
I'll ask
courts
you,
come to
I'll
it?
ask you a
Have the
counter
police
question.
come to
How
it?
many times have you seen the Supreme Court intervening in the cases of lynching? How many times did the Supreme Court take suo motu notice of Muslim girls in hijab being prevented from going to school, being virtually molested on the roads? How many times has the Supreme Court come to the rescue? Even in the case of recent, which you referred to, Gyalvapi thing, the Supreme Court, in its own judgment in 2019 Babri Masjid case, spoke in glowing terms about Places of Worship Act of 1991 and said Babri Masjid is an exception thing and this act is also.
Could you explain what the Places of Worship Act for
But
viewers who
whatever
don't
the
know?
places of worship,
Right.
whatever the status at the time of partition on 15th August, that condition will
Whatever the
stay.
religious character.
Like whatever the religious character, if there was a temple at that time, Muslims cannot say, okay, 100 years back it was a mosque and we want the mosque back. Or if there was a mosque there, Hindus cannot say, okay, 100, 200 years ago there was a temple. So the character of that particular place as it was in 1947.
This was passed after Babri was
Yeah,
demolished.
this was passed by the Narasimha Rao government.
Right.
Will stay as it is. The only exception was Babri Masjid. And the court gave its when the court gave its verdict in the Babri Masjid case in November 2019, it referred as much to the case of Places of Worship Act. But after that glowing affirmation of the Places of Worship Act by the Supreme Court, session court after session court started admitting petitions against various mosques across North India and Central India. The cases went to High Court and then finally Supreme Court. Where did the Supreme Court draw a line? Why was the need to admit a petition against Qutub Minar or Qubbatul Islam or Shahi Eidgah or any such thing in the first place when you have the Places of Worship Act? And if the petition had been entertained by a lower court, why did the higher judiciary step in? Unfortunately, some of our judges have made the most pious statements about our democracy, about our constitution. Unfortunately, their public proclamations are not always on par with their judgments. There is often a variance between what they say in a seminar and what ultimately their Supreme Court or High Court verdicts prove later on.
I'd like to use this interview also, Ziya, to shine a light internally on the processes of Indian Muslims. Indian Muslims are a huge community. I think we forget sometimes how big they are. Like there are 200 million Indian Muslims
in the country.
Sorry?
200 million Muslims
200
in the
million
country,
Muslims. So,
yet not a single MP in the ruling party, not a single chief minister across our beloved India, not one Muslim chief minister across India, right. And it's not about the BJP. When the Congress has to put up a chief minister in Karnataka, it has to be a Hindu. When Congress has to put up a minister in Telangana, chief minister, it has to be a Hindu. When DMK does it, when AIADMK does it, when BJD does it, it's across the political spectrum. Nobody in the political spectrum wants to have any truck with Muslims. To be a Muslim is to be a crime.
One thing that I wanted, to sort of also go through is there a leadership vacuum within Indian Muslims? Are they also at some level being unable to present their own case?
I'm so glad you asked me this because this is something I've been very keenly observing. Where is the Muslim leadership?
Right.
Across the country, except OSCE, does any name come to the common man's mind? Somebody who has a certain vision for the community, certain vision for the country. And community cannot progress without country's progress, and vice versa. I'm yet to come across those Muslim leaders in our country, partly because I think the Muslim community in the past have been very happy to vote for the so-called secular parties. And they did not think in terms of developing their own leadership. It had largely to do maybe with what happened with Jinnah and partition. So there was this reluctance to project a Muslim as a leader in the initial years. But even today, as we have discussed already, it's very difficult for a Muslim to get the Hindu vote in some of the constituencies, as was the case with Western UP. But it's not something which is not possible, as again Karnataka and Kerala have consistently proved, as Bengal has proved. There are people from the Muslim community who are in a position to win elections on the basis of support of all communities.
This is an interesting point to raise here. Is there a regional difference in what you're describing? Is it worse in UP? Is it better in Karnataka? Like, is there a difference like that? Is there a gradient?
UP is a successor to Gujarat.
Right.
In Gujarat, the last time BJP put up a Muslim candidate was in 1998.
Right.
And Congress has been giving tickets to Muslims, only 5 or 6 of them in every Vidhan Sabha elections. And nothing seems to have changed in Gujarat. And UP is on the same path. In the last elections, Vidhan Sabha elections, Samajwadi Party was banking heavily on the support of Muslims to win. Besides, obviously, Yadav and many OBCs, that was the Rainbow coalition. Akhilesh Yadav had stitched it together at that time. But how many Muslim MLAs were there with him on stage when he went from one seat to another? How many times? 2, 3? And how many constituencies are there in UP? So that was the thing. You want a Muslim vote, but you're a bit apologetic about seeking the Muslim vote. Like you have this Assam chief minister from the BJP being open about it that he does not want a Muslim vote. He is not seeking the Muslim vote. We had similar instances in Uttarakhand where BJP MLA said it in Rudrapur. I don't want the Muslim vote. That is condemnable. But how far tolerable is this reluctance of the so-called secular party Samajwadi to show a Muslim candidate from stage, and without showing him from stage, without projecting him from stage, you want a Muslim vote? Akhilesh Yadav won't use the word Muslim at most of the places. There's just a handful of occasions when he used the word Muslim. Otherwise, it was always हम सबको साथ लेके चलेंगे and all those kind of generalities they indulge in. It is not the same before 2014. India was for all. Today, it seems India, our country, is only concerned about the interest, well-being, projection of one community, and India is slowly alienating its own minorities.
Coming back to leadership, we saw what was a really remarkable movement, largely amongst Muslims in 2019 and 2020, which was against the Citizenship Amendment Act.
Yes.
You had lakhs of people coming out on the street. It was really quite a bottom-up movement. It almost was a leadership-less movement. It was almost happening spontaneously across India, from Kerala to Assam to UP. What are the changes that the CA has made on the Muslim psyche in India?
See, when you talk of the Shaheen Bagh movement after CA was passed, you have to give a lot of credit to the Shaheen Bagh women in Delhi. They were faceless multitudes. They didn't have a political leader to guide them,
right,
or handhold them. This protest was piloted by women who had probably never stepped out to buy groceries in the first place, whose life was confined to the four walls of the house. Most of them were senior citizens, 75, 80-year-old women, 85-year-old women, who braved the cold of Delhi, put their own lives in danger by stepping out and staying out in the cold of Delhi when the temperature goes to 3-4 degrees in December, and sleeping under an open sky. In Delhi, when we have a senior citizen at home, we make sure that all the windows are properly closed, all the doors are properly closed when he or she goes to bed, so that he or she is safe. But here, these women just forgot about their own safety and stood up for the idea of India. They stood up for Article 14 of the Constitution, which is the right to equality. They didn't just stand up against CAA. They stood up for the Constitution.
That's something I want to ask. So,
Because they had the Constitution of India in one hand, the Quran in the other hand. 10 times a day they would sing Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. On 31st December midnight, when most of us were partying in different hotels, these women stood shoulder to shoulder and sang Jan Gan Man. What can be a bigger advertisement or affirmation that they had faith in India's democracy and they wanted their own space in India's democracy? It was that. And it started from Shahin Bagh, and as you rightly said, it went on from there to UP, Assam, Bengal, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, across the country, and a completely faceless, absolutely peaceful movement. If there were people who really valued India as a pluralist democracy, it was a shining example.
Do you think it succeeded, the movement?
The movement succeeded in the sense that the notification never came. It hasn't come to CA even today. Though we do have those periodic statements by BJP MPs in different cities, particularly in Bengal. Every now and then they talk of NCR and CA and so on. But the very fact that these women made it to Time magazine and the notification never came means that they were successful, even if it was partially so.
And something that you mentioned, how much of the CA movement, so obviously one part of it was driven by opposition to the CA, but how much of that is also driven by the fact that it was trying to uphold constitutional values? Muslims felt marginalized, and this was an outlet for their
See, when the Muslims thought
for their fears.
Muslims thought that okay, they were being targeted by the ruling dispensation. They took recourse in Dr. Ambedkar's mantra. You uphold the constitution of the country. The fight was for Ambedkar Rashtra versus Hindu Rashtra. The fight was for the idea of India. And that is why they deserve a lot of credit. Because if you go back in time, these women did not come out to protest when the Babri Masjid Ram Janambhoomi saga was going on. They did not come out to protest even when Babri Masjid was demolished. They did not hit the roads even in the case of instant triple talaq. But it was only with CAA that they realized, okay, it's not just the question of Muslim identity. It's a question of the right to equality to all people granted by the Constitution of India. That is in danger, that they came out and protested. And I think they have not been given as much credit as they probably deserve. Many people who do say nice things about them largely look at it as the movement of Muslim women. It was not just about Muslim women. It was about the Constitution of India. And we should be very proud of people who upheld Article 14 of our beloved Constitution.
Ziya, to wrap this fascinating interview up, if you were addressing a young Muslim right now in India, what would you tell her to do? What should she do to sort of keep her head upheld high, to sort of continue living a part of this great country?
I'll tell all Muslims, young or old, build bridges. Build bridges with each other, build bridges with other communities, Hindu communities, Christian communities, Sikh communities. Because at the end of the day, it's our country, our land. Nobody's going away. We are born here. We'll die here, God willing. And our issues of life are the same. Everybody wants education. Everybody wants employment. And so on. Everybody wants security of life and livelihood. Build bridges. Go to people. Explain to them what it is to be a Muslim. Invite non-Muslims into your house. As a campaign was started by Shabnam Hashmi, Mere Ghar Aake To Dekho.
Right.
Invite non-Muslims into your house. Dispel their illusions, their wrong feelings about a Muslim. Invite them to your home. Go to their houses, which is what we used to do before 2014. Just resume that. Don't live a ghettoized life. It's difficult today not to live in a ghetto because in many places Muslims won't get an apartment on rent or a property to buy, as we have seen in so many cases. But there are still ways of circumventing that. Meet in neutral spaces to begin with, then invite people home. Build bridges. Is the strength of the masses. which will ultimately save the country.
Thank you so much, Ziya. This was a fascinating
Thank you.
interview. We're almost at the end of our time. Before we go, if you like this episode of Scroll Ideas and you like the journalism the Scroll does, I would urge you to contribute. Go to scroll.in/contribute so that we could continue to do the journalism that we're doing in a country where it's increasingly becoming rare. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Scroll Ideas. I'm your host, Shoaib Daniyal. Thank you.